Welcome to Love Your Life After Divorce, the podcast where you'll learn everything you need to know to rebuild your life after divorce from the inside out. Let's dive in. Hey there, friend. How are you doing? Recovering and healing after divorce has plenty of ups and downs. There are some weeks where maybe you feel like you're doing amazing. You're doing so well. You feel this peaceful feeling, or you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then other weeks, you may feel like you're really struggling. Maybe you have lots of really painful emotions that are coming back to the surface. Maybe something you thought you had dealt with is now resurfaced and it's really frustrating. But let me just tell you that healing and recovering and rebuilding your life after divorce is not a straight line. There are lots of ups and downs, and that's just a normal part of the process. So nothing has gone wrong. If you are really struggling right now, I know it's not fun. It doesn't feel good, but please know that it's just a normal part of the process and you won't be in this difficult place forever. And just keep giving yourself the compassion and the self care that you need right now. So, today I want to talk to you about closure. Now, I think closure is something that we could all pretty much agree that we want. Why do we want closure? First, let's get clear on what the definition is of closure. I mean, when you hear that word closure, what do you think about? Do you think that it means being completely over your ex, or believing that your marriage should have ended, or knowing it's for the best? Well, of course, I did a little research and I kind of pieced together different definitions to create my own definition of closure. And here's how I would describe it: it's the feeling of peace and understanding that comes from accepting the end of a relationship. You have a sense of completion that allows you to move forward. One chapter has ended, and now you're ready to start a new chapter. So, closure is not something that we do once and for all. It's not like closing a door. I like to think of it as walking across a long bridge. With every step you take, you get closer to closure, and the past gets farther behind you. And actually, this whole visualization of a bridge is something helpful that I like to think about in relation to the entire process of divorce and rebuilding. This visual of this bridge is really powerful to me, and I think it applies to closure, but it also applies to the bigger picture of just recovering after divorce in general. And the way I have imagined it in my own mind that's been really helpful for me is that, when you're married, you're on one bank over here, right? And there's this bridge that spans this really vast river. And when we're on this bridge over this river, that's when we're either in the process of getting a divorce and kind of rebuilding and figuring out who we are after the divorce. And this isn't a perfect analogy because I don't think there is any arrival point, right? I mean, our lives are continually different series of growth. And I don't think there's any point in our lives where we just arrive and then we're perfectly happy and all is right and everything is exactly like we wanted and we feel exactly the way we want to feel. That's not realistic. And so this analogy is not exactly perfect, but I think it's really helpful and powerful because the way I like to think about it is when you begin that divorce process, the moment you find out that you are going to get a divorce, whether that means you realize it within yourself, like I did, it may be hard for those of you who didn't choose divorce. It might be hard for you to understand this, but in my experience, when I realized I wanted a divorce, it felt like I had been hit over the head with a two by four, or like the wind was knocked out of me. It was just this overwhelming realization that this is what I wanted and this is what was going to happen. But it's nothing that I ever wanted for my life, if that makes sense. It's not what I envisioned. It's not what I wanted to happen. But when I realized this is what is best for me and this is what I really want, it was really, really difficult to face that. Like it almost it almost felt like someone else telling me that you're going to get a divorce. I was like, "Wait, what? No, that's not what I envisioned. That's not what I want my life to be. I don't want to do that to my kids. I don't want to face all this unknown and uncertainty, you know?" And so I think whether or not you chose divorce or not, just recognizing that you are about to get a divorce, you're embarking on this divorce journey, it can just be terrifying and really debilitating and bring up all kinds of scary emotions. And so, back to my little bridge analogy, the way I like to think of it is when you first realize that you are going to get a divorce, you are on that bank. And when you start that divorce process internally and externally, that's when you take that first step onto that little rickety wooden bridge that has some planks that are loose or missing, and it's this rope bridge that's really not very stable. It's very wobbly. And with each step, you feel like you might just fall off and die into this rushing water that's underneath you. It's so strong. The water is just rushing, rushing past. And you know that if you fall into that water, you are in trouble. And that's what it feels like when you begin the divorce process, right? I mean, you feel just so scared and uncertain and uneasy, and you don't know if you're going to make it. And so that's the beginning of that bridge. But the more steps you take, the bridge becomes more stable. It becomes still. It's no longer wavering and moving around. The ground of the bridge feels more stable underneath your feet. And it becomes much easier to walk, and you walk more quickly and you walk with more confidence. And so that's what I like to think of as the divorce recovery process itself. And I think this also applies to this idea of closure, because I don't think closure is just a very quick one and done. You make a decision or you find out some information and then boom, now you have closure. I think closure for most people, most of the time, is a process. So that's what I want to talk to you about today is just how do we get closure? I've already shared with you what closure is. So now let's talk about why closure is important. It's important because when we don't have closure, we have inner turmoil. We spend a lot of time and mental and emotional energy thinking about the relationship, questioning why it ended, trying to make sense of what happened, arguing with reality, wishing things were different, wishing that the divorce wasn't happening or that we didn't lose the relationship we had with our ex. And so when you don't have closure, you don't have peace. Getting closure brings peace. It just brings a sense of calm. It brings a sense of acceptance. And that is something we all want. And so that leads us to the question of how do we get closure? And I have highlighted here 6 ways to get closure after divorce. Number 1 is that you have to honor and feel and accept all of your painful emotions. I'm going to sound like a broken record if you have been listening to this podcast, but it's just so important to feel your emotions. You have to feel it to heal it. And there's no timeline for this. It's tempting to want to know how long am I going to be feeling really sad? Or how long is this anger just going to continue to burn within me toward my ex? There's no timeline. But the quickest way and the best and most healthy way is to allow yourself to feel whatever comes up for you. Learning how to feel and process your emotions is such a superpower. Being able to sit with and notice where an emotion is surfacing, where it's coming up for you in your body, and being able to just observe it is such a powerful tool that you can learn and that you can practice. And so don't judge yourself for any emotion that you may have. All emotions are okay, and just give yourself the time and space to feel them. If journaling helps you, journal. Every time you have a strong negative emotion, painful emotion, just journal about it. Talk to a good friend about it. Go to therapy. Hire a life coach. Find some safe way, safe person, safe place to really feel and allow those emotions to be there. Number 2 is to set boundaries with your ex if you need to. How often and how you communicate with your ex, those are negotiable. Do what works for you. If you need some distance, You don't have to sit and chat with him when you switch off the kids. If that's not comfortable for you and if that's not helping you let go and move forward, it's not being mean to not want to have this buddy close relationship with your ex if that's not what's best for you right now. And also, if your ex texts you or emails you, you're not required to respond right away. You don't have to drop everything you're doing just because he's the father of your kids in order to answer him. Another good idea is that maybe you should stop following him on social media. Seeing what he's up to with his life, especially the things he chooses to post on social media, which we all know are only a tiny fraction of our real lives, and they're only the highlights of what you want everyone to see that you're doing. It's not a realistic picture. And I hear from a lot of women that it's really hard for them to see their ex moving on and enjoying their lives, especially if they're now dating someone new. And you don't have to subject yourself to that. You don't need to know that he's out at a concert with this new girlfriend and he's having a great time. That is not relevant to your co parenting relationship. And so, if you do have kids with your ex, just focus on what is vital and important as far as co parenting your kids together. Just focus on that area of your communication with your ex and let other things go or set up boundaries for yourself if you need to. Number 3 is to forgive yourself and your ex. Holding on to anger and resentment toward your ex only hurts you and holds you back from moving forward. Now, I plan to do an entire podcast episode about forgiveness. And so I'm not going to say a ton about it right now, but holding on to that anger and resentment can really just burn you up inside. And one thing I do want to highlight here that I think a lot of people get confused about, which is why they have a hard time forgiving, is that forgiveness does not equal condoning. Just because you choose to forgive your ex for horrible things he did or said to you, that does not mean that you're giving him or yourself the message that it was totally fine what he did, that it wasn't wrong, or that it wasn't a big deal. You can hold on to the truth that it was not okay, that you were treated unfairly, unkindly, that it was not acceptable, and you also choose to forgive and move on because it's best for you. And then, as far as forgiving yourself, that can be really hard too when you know you made some really big mistakes in your marriage. I have a whole episode on guilt. If you struggle with feeling guilty for some choices you made, that would be a great episode for you to go back and listen to. And so learning to forgive yourself and your ex will just allow you to stop focusing so much on your past relationship. And that's part of what you need to do in order to get closure, in order to close that chapter and look forward. So, number 4 is that you can learn from your mistakes or just the experience of your marriage relationship. So, this looks like taking accountability for what you did to create an unhealthy relationship. It always takes two people. Sometimes we get into this black or white thinking, all or nothing thinking. We either want to decide that the marriage ending was all our ex's fault, that he is the sole problem, or we decide that our actions or inactions are the thing that created this break and caused the divorce. And I don't think either of those are accurate. It's never only one person's fault. And I think there's always something to learn from a relationship. And maybe what you need to learn is why you chose to ignore certain yellow or red flags. So maybe it's not necessarily that you have regrets about something you did to your ex, but there are definitely dynamics, ways you showed up in the relationship that you can learn from and understand yourself better and just gain a lot more self-awareness about why you are the way you are in relationship so that you can move forward and have healthier relationships in the future. Number 5 is to practice gratitude. This may be a hard question, but I want you to ask yourself this question and just open up and see what comes out because it might surprise you. Why is it a good thing that you got a divorce? Sometimes it's so easy to focus on all the bad things about our divorces that we forget to look at the good things. there probably are multiple things that you can decide are good things that came from the fact that you are now divorced. Another question, another way to phrase this is just, what do I enjoy about my life now that I'm divorced? And aside from just focusing on the divorce itself and your thoughts about it, it's just good to be grateful in general. And so, a great, very simple exercise that you can do to help yourself feel more thankful and practice gratitude is just at the end of each day, ask yourself, what are three things I am grateful for about today? You could incorporate this at the dinner table with your kids. Let's all share three things that we enjoyed about our days. Or, you can have a little notepad next to your bed or in the little drawer of your side table and just jot down three things at the end of each day, right before you go to bed. That just creates just a nice, more optimistic attitude about your life. And then number six, the last thing I want to share with you that I think will help you get closure is to focus on your future and the life that you want to live. When you don't have closure, you're focusing on the past. You're focusing on your relationship. You may be, mulling over all the things that went wrong or what could have been different. Or if only this thing would have happened or wouldn't have happened, then maybe the reality wouldn't be like it is now. We wouldn't be divorced. We wouldn't have, I wouldn't have these difficulties. But when you choose to focus on your future and the life you want to have, you're purposefully using your brain power to think about that instead of your past. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but they've done studies proving that we can't truly multitask because our brains can really only focus on one thing at a time. We may be able to swap back and forth between two things pretty quickly, and that makes us think we're multitasking. But really, your brain can only have a single focus at a time. And so, the more time you can spend thinking about your future, thinking about your ideal life, the life that you really want to have, all those little things. Well, one day I just made a list because I thought to myself, you know what? Sometimes I have these fleeting little thoughts about things I want or things that I wish were a little bit different in my life. And I just kind of let them pass by in my mind and I don't really give them a whole lot of attention because they seem small. But those things all add up. Like one of my things was that I want some flowers planted in my front yard and, some more pictures or art hung on the walls in my house. Those are things that I just kind of wish were different, but I haven't really made the effort to change them, right? And so just focusing on all those little things, like what do I wish day to day in my life was a little different? Maybe you haven't bought clothes in a couple of years. I'm so guilty of that. I will look in my closet and think, wow, these clothes are all at least 5 years old. And so, little things like that, those are the small steps that you take to create a new life that you really enjoy living. And focusing on your future doesn't allow you to keep focusing on your past. And so, those are my 6 tips for you in order to get closure. I'm going to run through them really quickly again. Number one, you have to feel your emotions. Number two, set boundaries with your ex if you need to. Number three, forgive yourself and your ex. Number four, learn from your mistakes or the experience of your marriage relationship. Number five is to practice gratitude. And number six is to focus on your future and the life you want to have. And I also want to say one more thing about closure that I think is really important. You don't have to have all of the information to have closure. You don't have to understand exactly why your ex said or did all the things he said or did. Sometimes you're never going to get answers. And I know it's really frustrating because it feels so much better to our brains to have all the pieces of the puzzle so that we can put them neatly together and create this really clear picture so that we can gain understanding. But truly, full understanding of the picture is not necessary to get closure. And that's actually a really good thing because then you're not dependent on gaining this information or finding out the quote truth of what happened. You can decide to give yourself closure. You can tell yourself things like, I know enough. I know plenty to show me that I was not being treated like I deserved, or he definitely stepped outside of the marriage, and I know that. So I don't need to know all the ins and outs of exactly when and who and how long. You know he stepped out, and that's enough information to allow you to believe that you guys should not be together and you deserve much better. You also don't need an apology from the other person in order to have closure. You can close that chapter on the relationship, like I said, knowing that you deserve better, that that was not the relationship for you. It can really hurt to realize that your ex no longer wants to be married to you. But having that information, even if you don't understand exactly why, or even if you question, was there something you could have done differently to salvage the relationship? It is enough information to know that your ex no longer wants to be married to you. That's enough for you to close that chapter and move on. So, I just really want to encourage you to give yourself the gift of closure. And again, there's no rush for this to happen, right? I mean, I've highlighted the reasons why it's great to get closure, why it feels nice to have it, how it helps you move forward, which I think is really important. But especially if you're early in the divorce process, it may take you a little while to get to closure, and that's okay. There's no race here. It doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong if it takes you, a while to get to closure. But just be aware of the fact that you can create closure for yourself. You can take steps like the steps I outlined today that will help you get there in a healthy way, no matter how long it takes. So just be intentional about your own healing. And the fact that you are even listening to this podcast lets me know that you are serious about your healing, that you want to feel better, that you want to create a life you love after divorce, that you don't want to be held back by dwelling on the past. And so just take any of the steps I mentioned today and just start that journey for yourself. If there's any way that I can help and support you along your journey, I would be honored to do so. It truly is an honor to hear from you all, whether it's by email, on Instagram, whether you schedule a call with me. I love having those free sessions with people who sign up for a free call with me. It's super easy. We just jump on Zoom, we chat about where you are in this process. I love to be able to help women with one specific thing they're struggling with. So feel free to reach out, and I will talk to you soon. If you're feeling lost, overwhelmed, or unsure of how to move forward after your divorce, I've created a free guide just for you. It's called the 5 Stages of Divorce Recovery, and it lays out the roadmap to help you heal, rebuild, and love your life after divorce. This guide is packed with insights and actionable steps that will take you from grieving to embracing your future with confidence. Click the link in this podcast description, and the free guide will be delivered straight to your inbox.